Welcome back. We're back, Tim.
We're back. Good to see you, Jason.
Who ever thought that we would make it to podcast number 4? Who would have thought?
Here we are.
Right? I'm very happy we have gotten here. We've gotten some great response on the videos and the discussions. And today we've got something exciting to talk about. Some introductions. Jason Neiman, Good Brand Company. Good to see everybody again.
Tim Gustafson.
Yeah.
Applied Leadership Coaching.
There you go. I like it. So we're back today. We had a great video last time, and we had a little bit of a shorter length last time. We tried to hit 20 minutes. Just seemed a little bit too short maybe, so we got right at about 30. So what we're going to do today is try to hit the 30 mark again. That seemed to be pretty comfortable. So we'll go ahead and try to do that. And today we're going to talk about change. So let's just go ahead and jump right on in and have some discussion around, people in business and in their lives. And so I'll begin with a very simple question, Tim. Why change?
Why change? Good question. So, change, I think, in my humble opinion, change is all about growing and learning and developing. Without change, we don't move. And, but change can strike fear in people. It can be a pretty tough concept, perspective to overcome or even to think about, depending upon the situation and the circumstance. So, change is a great thing in my opinion. We move, we develop, we get better as we consider and take upon ourselves change. Sometimes these changes are self-induced. Other times they happen just because that's sort of what happens in life. And other times they're put upon us. And I think the responses we have to those can be very, very different depending upon our attitude and our approach to these changes that come about. So,
right.
And maybe even the question is, why not change? Why wouldn't we do change? And sometimes that is maybe even a more appropriate question to consider as we think through these life progression and life circumstances that we have.
Agreed. My next question was going to be why not change, but you beat me to it. So there we have it. Let's talk about a little bit from an individual perspective as a leader. Why should somebody really embrace change and also introduce it to their organization so that the organization gets comfortable with that?
I think change brings about the opportunity to take upon ourselves risk. Risk brings change to us because we don't know, or maybe I should say, change brings risk to us because we don't always know what's going to happen on the other side of these changes.
Right.
And so without that knowledge, there is some risk that's involved. Now, some of us are great risk takers and enjoy it, and I know you enjoy the opportunity to change.
I do.
Yeah, but boy, there's so many people out there that just fear the idea of changing the status quo.
Right.
What I have going on here is comfortable. I'm good here. Don't disrupt me. But from an individual perspective, we have to take risks in order to grow. And when we're in that place of risk, that's when we learn so much because our tentacles are up. Our antenna are up. We're listening. We're out there sort of touching, feeling what's happening because we're on the edge.
Right.
And that's when we learn so much because we are so aware of our surroundings and what's going on. When we're in that comfort zone, boy, we just sort of go with the flow. We don't really think about those opportunities for growth and development. It's just a comfortable place to be.
So are you suggesting that in order to grow, you have to change? Or is that, it's not always there, obviously, but is in most cases, do you have to change in order to grow, to do the next thing?
I think, and I suppose it depends upon your definition of what change is. I mean, knowledge and new ideas that come about are that you could say that that's change because it changes our perspective and our view on things versus a large physical change or an environmental change or relationship change or something like that. But all these changes bring about new concepts and ideas to our mind, to our hearts, to ourselves. And so I think yes. I think the answer to that is yes. It is about learning and growing and developing, which equals change.
In the companies where you have done a lot of your coaching, when there's a leader that has a resistance to change, is that usually part of the culture of the company, or do you often see that there are people that want to change but can't because the resistance of the leader?
Yeah, boy, that the leader is key in the whole process of change. Leader is really in my mind, another name for a leader is a change agent. They have to be, right? They're the ones that introduce it. They hear about it first. They plan it out before the people know about it. The leader brings about change. And so, communication as an attribute for leadership is pretty important because change incorporates the idea of communication. You have to be able to communicate, understand, listen, and communication is the vehicle by which things happen in our lives.
Sure. And how would you approach? There's employees that get frustrated because the leadership doesn't want to change. And how would you give them advice on how to approach that then? I know, again, we talk in generalisms here, and not every situation is the same, but are there some things that are commonality points for that type of a discussion?
Every situation is different, but I think that, the risk aversion that many leaders and companies face, they get into this mode of, hey, we've been doing it this way for so long, we're highly successful, why should we change? Right. And it's a big deal to push a change through a company that is successful, because there is resistance to it. Why are we doing this? We're highly successful. We're making money. We designed these processes for it to be successful. Why should we go through all this cost to make a change that we don't know what's going to be successful on the other side? And so, there are a lot of situations where leadership companies do not want to change. It's the status quo. Most of those are highly established organizations that I've found, at least that I've worked with. But that can also happen in small companies too. We get used to doing things a certain way, and I don't want to disrupt that.
Yeah. We haven't talked much about, in our previous podcast, we haven't talked much about, detailing what you've done for us as a company. But as it relates to change, can you give sort of some insights to the people that are watching, that what you've seen from our company, the way we've changed from when we first met and the people that were involved to where we're at right now? And what do you think of that growth, the change? Do you feel like, I'd just be curious, and we're not talking about an ethereal group, we're talking about my team and how that was affected.
And you're sure you want to go there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it'd be good. I think it'd be good to just just talk a little bit about what you have seen throughout the process with my team, because we've been working now for about a year with you on this, and so I'd be curious to see, after a year, what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, So I think there's some wonderful things, but it starts with leadership. So both Damon and yourself, you guys have embraced the idea of looking at life differently, looking at the way you think about your clients. You look at how do we engage our employees in a different way. You started out with this vision, is what is the vision that we want to try to accomplish over the next X months or years?
Right.
And so those visions are what are being put in place now, the sort of the genesis of the changes that you guys are considering and working through, actually, not just considering.
Right.
So you guys have been out, take the vision, you've been out going and pushing it. The results are starting to come back in, right. More volume. The clients are expanding. Number of clients are more. The depth at which you're going into your clients is more. I think your perspective has changed, and the way you interact then with the clients has changed because it's
Right.
wide open now. It's much more open than it was before.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And just to kind of finalize that, everything isn't always rosy either. There are some people on the team that, go into a leadership training and are hesitant because they feel like, their personality is going to be picked apart, or they aren't really comfortable with change, and once they're in the process, they realize it's change, not change for change's sake, but
Right.
change for progress. And
yes.
you have to be very, I think as a leadership team, you have to be very careful to make sure that if you're going to be bringing in and doing, personality assessments and leadership assessments, that you continue through the process so that you implement those things, and it doesn't just seem like, oh, it's another Myers-Briggs test that you do, and then you walk out of that meeting and then everybody goes, oh, I know the kind of person you are, but you never follow up and you never take that next step as to how that impacts the organization and how it moves. So, at least from my perspective, I think the level of change that we've seen in the last year versus the first four, we probably have changed as much in this fifth year as we did in the first four altogether, or maybe even more.
Yeah.
Just because you have all that background, but we also have a great coach who can guide us and allow us to come to the conclusion on our own, but with some markers, and I think that that's a key. Can you talk a little bit about that? We've touched on it in the past, but it's always curious to me about how you approach guidance versus consulting or telling people what to do, as far as it goes with change. Like,
Yeah.
how do you get people to change without telling them these are the things you need to change?
Oh, good question. So I think the concept of self-awareness is the key in the whole process. And when changes come about, we have to consider all these attributes that we have, the way we operate, our processes, and so forth. And those sometimes are the things that are the most difficult to change. Yeah, we've got the vision. We see where we want to go. But now sort of the rubber meets the road, and I've got to deal with it on an individual basis. I've got to change myself as a leader before we can start asking the company or the people, the employees, to start changing. And so that can be really, really hard as a leader, or just as an individual in general. But for me, that's sort of where this whole thing starts, and that's where the coaching comes into play. Is the individual translates, hey, I know I've got to do this in order for us to move in that direction.
Right.
So the individual has that, and then it's my job to just start asking those questions. All right, so are you going through that? What's the default that you're going back to? Why is this so difficult for you? What is it that you fear? What are the things that are roadblocks for you? So it's these questions to just sort of unlock and open up the brain and the heart to, oh, I guess I can go do that. That really isn't a roadblock. It's in my head. I can let go of that. Oh, okay.
Right.
So the individual discovers it just by merely pointing out the roadblock, or pointing out the question, or bringing the question up. Hey, that roadblock is what? And the individual, of course, it's this. I have known that all along.
Right.
Well, why not remove it? I don't know. I guess I could. Right. And there's never been this idea of, hey, I can just take this out and move on. I'm the one holding myself back. And that's, I think a vast majority of the time, those are the situations, is that we have to become aware of these roadblocks ourselves, and we got to pick it out, and usually they're right smack dab in front of us, and we're just not willing to deal with it. So
do you feel like the level of resistance with companies today versus 4 or 5 years ago is more or less when it comes to change at this point?
Well, I think the level of resistance has to be less in order for companies to survive. I think things are happening so quickly, and the change, you just think about the internet and the
Right.
amount of information that's out there and the number of people that have access to it. It continues to compound constantly.
Right.
And we cannot keep up with it. We cannot stay abreast of all the stuff that's out there. But in order to even keep up, we have to be changing. We can't stay the status quo because somebody's going to pass us by.
Right.
If I could sort of mention a quick little story. So
Sure.
back in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, right?
Right.
The German, East Germany said, hey, from now on, people can come and go West Germany to East Germany. And so opened it up and the wall came tumbling down. And when that happened, it changed the world in many different ways. It opened up a lot. And the U.S. government was obviously pretty concerned because this was a big change.
Right.
So they did an evaluation and they came up with this term called VUCA, VUCA, and the acronym stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that is the world at that time that they defined that, hey, the world is now a VUCA world. We have this uncertain, it's volatile because of these big changes that are happening. Something that we thought was going to remain forever is now very different. And as I've gone through this process of trying to understand change in my career and life, that term really struck me. And I was speaking to a friend about it, and he mentioned, hey, Tim, you need to add to that interconnectedness and speed. So it sort of becomes a French word, I guess, or a French acronym, VUCACE. I don't know. So, because we are so interconnected, things happen immediately. People know the news of other stuff on an instantaneous basis. And it happens so quickly. So we are in this VUCACE kind of world. And how do you lead? How do you continue to stay on top of it? And I think back to your question about companies, the only way companies can stay on top is for their leadership to continue to grow and to learn and develop and keep pushing that ceiling up so that they can bring the level of competency of their company up so that they are not the roadblock. So right. Companies, individuals, we all have to be growing and learning and developing in order to keep up with the change and stay current and survive, for that matter, to keep our companies so that they will continue to be vibrant.
Right. And what about those companies that are successful currently and just say, to your point earlier, look, we're comfortable with where we're at. We're making the profits we need to make, and we're not seeing any slowdown. Do you think that if people are feeling that way, they should just stick it out, or do you feel like even in those times you need to be looking ahead?
Well, it certainly is a leadership decision of that company, because in my mind, I think the risk of not changing is so great that, next quarter it might be totally different.
Right.
Somebody may pass you by, take over your clients, and then what?
Right.
So I think the risk is just way too great to not change, to not be in this place of always learning and growing and developing.
Is there a risk of, and I guess I'm asking this question, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But what happens if a group changes and they see the changes that they've made go in the wrong direction? What if they make changes and then they feel like, oh gosh, it was better a year ago, and now we've sort of changed, and we're in a worse place. Do we just go back to the way we were and not take this chance again?
Boy, again, tough questions, tough decisions. Change is tough because you don't know what's going to be on the other side.
Right.
So the gathering of information is important, but we also can't be in a place of analysis paralysis, right? Because nobody makes a decision. Everybody's just analyzing, and we probably have enough information as it is right now to make the change and to move. But we study and study and study, and we keep adding all this stuff, and we never get anywhere. So I think there's decisions that, we got to make the changes, we got to move. If it's not the right change, course correct and move to another change.
Right.
And maybe it is moving back to where we were. I guess that's a possibility.
Okay.
So,
And what do you think about? Um, I guess it comes down to when we ask a question like, "How much can a company handle, change-wise?" Um, how do you approach that? Is it just a comfort level? Is it stretching a little bit more than you're comfortable? Is it really pushing the envelope so that you're uncomfortable? What is that marker that people should be looking for?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm working with a company right now, and they have purposely pushed so many big changes, huge changes within the company, changing their ERP system, changing their brand, their sort of they've changed leadership. There's just a ton of different things that they have going on. Wow, the volume of change that they've got happening is overwhelming.
Right.
But their sales are the highest they've ever been.
Hmm.
They've had records, I don't know, 3 or 4 quarters in a row.
Wow.
And yet they're still doing all these changes in the middle of all this stuff, middle of the great sales. So each company has to figure out what is it that we can do. And I think a big part of it is, there's this idea of resistance to change.
Right. Sure.
And right, resistance is based upon your abilities to change and your willingness to change. So we may not have the ability to make the change that we want to make. We may have to do a lot of training, may have to get new people in, whatever that is. Willingness is another part of it. We may have all the skill in the world, but if we're not willing to do it,
right,
it's going to be a disaster. So those two components have to be balanced, and you got to understand, do I have the change agents? Do I have the leaders that can help us progress and help us to get through this change? Are they willing to take it upon themselves and to push it into the organization and to help the organization through the change? So there's a lot to consider in this. And if you pile on lots and lots of change, there's almost so much, there's only so much resilience that people have.
Sure, of course.
Right? They can only handle a certain amount. There's a capacity at which we sort of break.
Right. And I would also say too that, leaders often fail in one major area with this, and that is to execute what the vision is and preempt, or that's the wrong word, but show the vision of where they want to be after the change. You can't just change and say, well, we're making changes to the employees and the staff and expect them to understand what the long-term vision is. You have to show that long-term vision to say the reason we're changing is because we want to get to X, right?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think, isn't that so important?
Yeah, the vision and the purpose are critical. And so part of that process is, what's the business case? From a company perspective, are we going to make more money out of this? Are we going to be quicker, more efficient, more effective in what we do?
Right.
That business case is going to be pretty important for people to understand. So, why is it that we're doing this change? So people need to be aware, need to create the awareness of the need for this change that we're going for. Maybe it's competition. Maybe it's because we're slow, or we have old machines, or our techniques need to be different, whatever that is.
Right.
Awareness is number one. And again, communication is the important part of this process. Following that, is there a desire? Do we have people on board that are going to be able to make this happen?
Right.
And if we do, fantastic. And if they buy into the change, great. That's probably more than half the battle. And then it's the knowledge and the ability.
And what if they don't buy into the change?
Oh, it's tough. That's tough, right? You got to sell it. It's got to be sold. And sometimes, people just sort of have to go along with it.
Right.
These changes can be negative to people. They can be positive to people.
Right. Because sometimes it leads to efficiencies, which means that, it's cost-cutting measures, it's saving, and maybe some people ultimately will lose jobs, or at least that's how they'll see it.
Yeah.
It could be that, more automation comes in because you're making changes, and that means that people could lose jobs. And it always gets back to that core of, the entire team doing what's best for the company, but that may mean that one of those people, or 5 of those people, or 20 of those people, maybe they have to do something different in life. And I think those, those are difficult situations for leadership. So I'm gonna close this out by asking you a question, and I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote from my perspective. As a leader of a company and a co-leader in specifically with my business partner, without the level of coaching that you provided, it would have taken us a lot longer to get to Z from A to decide what we wanted to change and how we wanted to continue to change. But I also think that it would have been more painful, and I think we wouldn't have had the same kind of buy-in from the team members had we not done it the way we went through it. And it's a little bit of an advertisement for you in a way, because I think that the investment we've made with you as a coach, with time, effort, and dollars, pays off in the end. So how would you, as a coach, then say to a person like me who runs a company, whether it be a small business or medium or large, what's your sales pitch? What do you normally say to somebody? Like, I could do this change. I'm a smart person. I could do this change on my own. What are you bringing to the table, Tim, that is going to ultimately end up in having us have a smoother transition, a more efficient one, have more buy-in, and ultimately achieve the results that we're going to have? How do you get there?
Wow.
Nothing like being put on the spot, right?
Yeah, I guess. So what would be my sales pitch? So, I think really as leaders, we are the change agents, and my role as a coach is to help people be better, help them be better people. And that process is all about change. And the basics of it are self-awareness. And so in order to get, and as it relates directly to change, with change, there are fears. That is part of the deal. The broad basic component of change is fear. I fear losing my job. I fear that I'm not going to be able to do this. Whatever those fears are. Right. So this concept of getting past our fears and understanding them, letting go of them, and moving on, that's one aspect of the coaching that I'm able to bring. That without awareness of that, you sort of miss it, right? You don't really go down that path. We don't analyze ourselves in that way typically, right? We just don't do that.
Right.
Because we don't want to face our fears because they're hard. Right. As a coach, I bring those direct questions that help you to deal with it, to manage it, to look at it, consider it. And I'll give you a quick little note here. So when my father passed away, my dad passed away, it's been like 6 years ago. After that happened, it was at least 6 weeks before I remember it distinctly, I was at work and I was at my desk and I stood up and it dawned on me, I have been in a fog. And I was sort of totally unaware. I knew I was struggling with stuff, but I was unaware of how deep this was.
Right.
And it just sort of dawned on me, wow, I'm in this fog. Holy cow. I recognize it. I'm coming out of it. Now, had I had a coach or a therapist or somebody to talk to about it, I bet I would have they would have helped me to recognize it earlier and to get through it.
Right.
So ultimately, yeah, we will get through these changes. But to your point, it may have taken us a year to get through this versus it's been a pretty focused couple of months that we really focused on getting some things changed. Right. And now you're implementing the changes, right?
Right, sure.
So
a lot of it's the time compression, but also the level of experience that you bring in watching other people make mistakes that you can guide other people around to keep them from going down the same roads, or to keep them being mindful. Being mindful of, it's not just about the company. It's about the people that work at the company. It's not just about the stockholders, although that's a huge part of it. But I think your level of focus on all those aspects and bringing them in give a level of focus in addition to the map on how to, the guiding on how to get there too. So, so that's a little bit of a sort of cherry on the top for you, I think, is, you compress the time schedule, which, as you pointed out earlier, timing is so critical in this day and age.
Yep.
You minimize the errors that are made within the process, which I think are, that's amazing amount of errors that could be made within that process. And honestly, I think you just bring a calmness to the whole process where you're saying it's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. You're going to make these changes. And look, if you make a change and you don't like it, you can change it again. Move, zig some more, or zag the other way. So I think those are some other things too, in addition to what you were saying, that, as a leader, I could give a testimonial that says, gosh, these are the things that really do happen when you bring in a leadership coach. And, your whole job is to have the best interest of those people in mind. And that's what you do. You live it. So
absolutely,
that's huge for you.
And I think the other part of it, that as you've been talking, is that it change happens on an individual basis, right? So we work on the individual basis, but we also work at the very highest level of vision development. And so you do go sort of low to high and high to low, A to Z and Z to A. You do the whole gamut in these things, and you have to, in order to manage the company change.
Yeah, for
and,
sure.
And I've got the experience to work on all those angles and in the middle of it as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if somebody wants to give you a ring or hit you up on email or whatever, what's the best way to do that so that maybe you can help them with their change?
Oh, excellent. So you can give me a call. 704-995-3870 is my cell phone. Or you can email me. Email is timgustafson@appliedleadershipcoachingllc.com.
Great. All right, Tim. We're just a smidgen, 32 minutes. So nice. We're just a smidgen over 30 minutes. I think this is a great place to stop. And,
it goes by so quickly.
It does. So we'll be looking forward to the next podcast. Not exactly sure what the topic's going to be yet, but I'm sure it'll be great. And I also think by the next time we'll have some other news about your business on some exciting things that are going on. So I'd like to thank you for your time, Tim, as always. And
thank you, Jason.
Looking forward to our next podcast.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Appreciate your questions and thoughts.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.